How's it going, everybody? Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports here, and today we're back in the shop with our Badlands Bronco build. So if you missed the previous video, we did wheels, tires, and suspension, and ARB / Old Man Emu hooked us up with a 2-inch lift. Then we threw on some 37-inch KO2s, and we also have a set of 17-inch fuel wheels. So the truck's looking really sharp, definitely bulked up the stance quite a bit, even though it was already a Sasquatch to start. But there's a couple other things we want to knock out, and obviously one of the main ones here is going to be this Warn Elite bumper that they sent us. This thing is a super heavy-duty steel bumper that's winch compatible. So we've also got a 10,000-pound VR Evo winch here, and we're going to run the synthetic line on this one. But want to get that thrown on here, and we also got a box full of goodies from Rigid with a bunch of their 360s and some wiring harnesses and things like that. So we're going to outfit it with some lights, get the winch on here, get it all functional, and this thing will be a little bit more trail ready by the time we're done. But the factory bumper removal is the first thing we got to knock out, and I'm not too worried about that. I think this modular bumper should come off super easy. Getting the new Warn bumper on is where it's going to get a bit tricky because it's so heavy. So we'll see. I'm probably going to have to make use of the 2-post lift behind us to help get this thing into place. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So let's scoot this stuff out of the way and I'll start tearing off some factory equipment. Really glad these actually came out in one piece and didn't just break. That's unusual. All right, this didn't break either. Excellent. No adaptive cruise here, so that makes that easy. Before we pull the wiring and the sensors out of the bumper, I'm gonna put some tape on here and label them all the way across so that way I know what position they need to be on the new bumper. This is the connector we had to pull to get the bumper off with the harness on it. So you'll find this up behind the driver's side headlight, but it's kind of hard to see on camera. So just push it with your thumb, pull it back, and that'll allow you to pull the whole thing off. Go. Got our harness out. To get these little brackets with the threaded inserts out of the back of this frame mount, there's 2 little plastic nuts that are kind of hidden back here, and you do want to make sure you save these. The Warn instructions don't quite explain what it is that you're looking for, but you'll see once I rotate it off. There we go. So that's the first one, and it just threads onto a post that's welded on the back of this. we go. All right, we only have one on this side because the other one popped out earlier when we pulled the bumper off. With Warren's new brackets that go inside of the frame mounts here, you do want to install the bracket that goes on the outside of the frame, basically towards the tire on each side, before you do the inside frame bracket, or else these won't fit. From here, you can kind of slide it in like that and then tip it upwards, and that gets it over the stud on the inside so you can hold it in place with those plastic nuts we took off earlier. Now we can slide the inside bracket into place. So I've got everything prepped on the Bronco in terms of the brackets that tie into the frame here. And then as you can see, we flipped the truck around. I've got it kind of facing our 2-post lift. So now we're gonna do some prep work on the bumper to get the brackets and things in place that we need here. We can also pop in all the parking sensors and whatnot. Then we'll see if we can get the winch in first or if it's gonna be easier to drop that in after the bumper's on the truck. I'm not really sure how to do that yet. We're kind of making it up as we go, but once I have this prepped, I should be able to use the lift to get it up into place, and we'll just bring the Bronco forward a little bit. So we'll start tackling all of that. And so far, everything's fit pretty well. All I'll say is that Warren's instructions mostly use pictures that are just of CAD drawings, which makes it a little confusing at first when you're reading through it, but it does all fit the way that you'd expect. So once you have a bit of an idea and you start piecing things together, it clicks in your head a little more easily. So we're pretty happy with it so far, but let's get in here and start buttoning things up. One of the last things I want to knock out on this bumper while it's still on the ground and not on the truck yet is getting the lighting in place. And Warren has these 2 fog light cutouts on each side, and they have some welded tabs behind them where you can tie in pretty much any little round pod light that you want. But Rigid hooked us up with some 360s. These are the smaller ones, but it's their new dual 360. So it's an SAE street legal fog light, but you can see it's got both an amber and a white section within the lens, and you can actually cycle between them. So if you want the amber for, you know, a little less reflective, kind of warmer toned light that cuts through dust a bit better, you can choose that. And then if you want to switch back to white and you need something that's a little bit sharper and has that clean, just stark white output, then you still have that option within the same pod, which is pretty sweet. I haven't used these before, but I think it'll be a good test to run them on the Bronco and try them out. And then I'm guessing that we can probably tie this wiring into the auxiliary switches that are already in the truck and probably run auxiliary 1 as amber and 2 as white or something along those lines. So be pretty cool to give these a shot, but they should tuck in there nicely. The only other thing I had to change, in case you guys are trying to emulate this setup at home, is with Rigid's hardware, I had to add a little bushing in here as kind of a spacer, and then I got some new nylock flange nuts for the top. So that way it sets the light a little bit more directly in the center of the pocket on the bumper. So that fitment should look a lot better as well, but I'm gonna get these popped in here and we'll keep pushing forward. All right, we've got our lighting locked in. The Rigids look real sharp in the bumper. So now it's the moment of truth. We've got to try and get this thing on the truck. And normally, Warren recommends that you'd have like 2 or 3 people to help you with this. So that way you can have 2 people on the sides to lift the bumper up, and then another person can get the hardware in place. I don't have anybody else to help me. So if you saw our First Light F-150 build, you know where this is going. And then the idea is that once the bumper is locked in, I can drop the winch in afterwards. That way I don't have the additional weight of the winch just sitting on the bumper and making it more tippy and harder to manage. So I did a bit of a test fit. It looks like it should still squeeze between the bar and the grill once it's on here. So really it's a matter of just doing it now. I'm gonna try and get it up and stable, and we'll see how it goes. Mission success. I got the bumper on the Bronco and I didn't die, so I'm pretty stoked about that. Now I just need to go through, I'm gonna torque everything down, and for those of you that are really touchy about getting exact torque specs, you'll be thankful. Warren actually includes a whole chart here in their instructions with the specs on all the individual pieces of hardware. So I'm gonna lock some of this in, and I'm also gonna go back and tighten down those frame mounts that we put on earlier now that everything's kind of in its place. And then once that's all locked in and good, we can really focus in on getting the winch in, and I'm also gonna tie up some of that wiring for the parking sensors. That way it's not just kind of floating around within the bumper. So let's get to it. So we're gonna make a quick diversion away from working on the bumper and the winch. My buddy Johnny's down here to help lay some decals on the truck. We wanted to dress this thing up a little bit as the build's coming together, but figured we'd just swing by, get this done real quick, and then we can move back to working on the bumper and the winch again. The decals are all wrapped up. The Bronco's looking really sharp. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, but you guys will be seeing a bit more of that later in the video. So now it's time to work my way back around to the front. I've got to get that winch in there, but I'm also going to button up some of the wiring and zip tie some stuff out of the way for those parking sensors just to make sure that they aren't going to interfere with getting the winch in place. And then it looks like the winch is already pre-spooled, so I'll have to do a little research and see if I need to do another tensioned re-spool before we actually use the thing, but thankfully it makes it easy for getting it in there. I can pretty much drop it all in as one unit, so fingers crossed that that'll go smooth, but I'm going to go ahead and get back into it. Well, I'm pretty happy with the progress so far on that front bumper. The only thing I have left to do up there is basically fit the skid plate. There's a little bit of trimming to notch out some corners there. That way it tucks in nicely with the new bumper hardware. And then I also have to tie in the winch wiring to the battery, but I'm gonna save the wiring until later because I wanna kind of run that when I run the lighting wiring and all that good stuff. And that way I can get it all loomed and tucked in a little better. But with that being said, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to run some lights up here on the A-pillars, or in front of the A-pillars, and the Bronco has provisions for this already. There's two little screws on each side that you can back out that are those Torx Plus that they use all over these trucks. And I was initially just gonna throw some smaller 360s up there like what we had in the bumper, but I couldn't help myself. I picked up a larger set of the 6-inch 360s. These are spot pattern with the amber backlight in them, and they're a ton of light, super aggressive, probably overkill for what we need, but I just really like the look of these larger round off-road lights on the Bronco. I think that that style is a little more classic. Even though it's LED, it just kind of reminds me of the, you know, old school round Baja runner kind of look. So I want to mount these up here, but I wanted a better way to get them onto the pillars or in front of the pillars. So that's where these little brackets come in, and these were from Grimm Offroad. I had these set aside for another build, but I decided to steal them to put them on here. And basically, those are going to tie into the two screws that are already on the Bronco, and it gives me a little bit of a taller pedestal to mount this to, and it's also a really stable base. So now this light can be shifted a bit more towards the mirror and not sit quite as far in front of the windshield, but it also gives it a bit more elevation as well, which I think looks nicer and just kind of helps the light to project out over the hood. So this should be a big plus to using these lights and just making them a little more useful off-road. But I'm gonna get all this tied in. I kind of did some test fits on the other side just to make sure everything was gonna work. So I'm gonna start piecing stuff together and we'll see how it goes. I made myself a real high quality jig out of 2 jack stands and a roll of masking tape, so I'm sure it's perfectly safe and won't have any problems. But the idea is that I can cut out these 2 marked areas to clear a bit of space where some of the machine bolts kind of poke down from the new bumper, and then that way we can reuse this factory skid and it should fit no problem. It has been an extremely long day of working on this rig and filming, but that looks fantastic. So I'm super excited with the progress that we've made. I'm gonna wrap up for tonight though. It's getting to be about midnight at this point, so I need to go home and get some sleep. But when I come back tomorrow, I'm gonna try and wrap up all the wiring. We'll test out the lights, make sure the winch works, get everything functional so it isn't just a mall crawler, and we should be golden. So I will see you guys in the morning. All right, day 2, like I said, we've got a lot of wiring to knock out, so I'm gonna get right into it, but I probably won't show you guys all the details of tying everything together just because it's only me in the shop today, so I don't even have a camera guy to help me out, but I'll check back in once I have it all done. Check it out, we are fully functional now. I got the fog lights tied in, got the pillar lights working, and I have the winch powered up. So we're pretty much ready to rock and roll, but I didn't show you guys a whole lot of detail on the wiring. Like I said, I kind of needed to move through it fast. I wanted to get it all tied in today. But to give you some perspective, I basically used 2 of Rigid's 360 series harnesses, which are just somewhat generic harnesses designed to power up any of their 360 pods. And I basically spliced those into the factory wiring that comes with that auxiliary switch panel that you can option into the Bronco, because I wanted to use those nice factory switches that are up above the dash, as opposed to drilling holes and trying to punch little aftermarket switches in all over the place. So it looks a lot cleaner that way. Obviously this feels very factory now, which I love. And the way that I set up the fogs, I basically ran the white output part of the fog light to auxiliary switch 2, and then I ran the yellow part of the fog light to auxiliary switch 3. Then for the pillar lights, I ran those to auxiliary switch 1 because the different switches actually have different fuses tied to them and different gauges of wire. One is the most hefty with a 30 amp fuse, so that seemed to make the most sense for the heaviest output light that we had. But between the 3 of these, we can cycle through them pretty easily, and I can choose if I want yellow or white, which is really cool and makes good use of that dual light functionality that Rigid has here. So overall, this will be plenty of light for us out on the trail. Like I said, I think in some cases it may even be overkill, but we've never been one to be reserved in our lighting setups. So I'm super stoked about that. And then of course, with the Warn Elite bumper on here, we were able to easily drop in a 10,000 pound Warn VR series winch. And we ran the synthetic line on that just because I like that it saves a little bit of weight and it tends to hold up pretty well so long as you keep it in the shade out here with all the sun that we have. But it's really nicely resistant to rust and corrosion issues because it's not like a steel cable. And obviously with the synthetic line, there's nothing that can rust in it. So I'm happy with all of that. It looks great. I think we've got some awesome functionality, and this will be also pretty well equipped to handle any trails that we're going to cover. But with that being said, the one other brand I want to thank is Grimm Offroad because of those light brackets that we got that I mentioned earlier, but also because of another part, which I'm going to give you kind of a sneak peek of right now since it's technically pre-production, but let's move around to the back of the truck. So what we've got here is Grimm Offroad's new spare tire reinforcement and relocation bracket setup. And when we threw the lift on here and sized up to 37s in that previous build video, we knew we still wanted to keep a full-size spare on the back, but obviously at 37's a little excessive for what the Bronco is meant to handle just from factory. So there are some other brackets out there that kind of serve a similar purpose, like the Rough Country kit that I installed on our previous Bronco, but the quality was lacking a bit and it's not quite up to snuff for what I'd normally like to have on our builds. So Grimm sent us this prototype version of their new bracket system, which I think is really sharp. It looks great. It's got that little MOLLE panel kind of design on the side, but it's also engineered to be quite a bit stronger and have a lot more rigidity than most of the competition. I will say that at the time of filming this, I have the prototype and the production version is not out yet, but by the time you guys are watching this, it may already be available. So if it is, we'll have a link down in the description so you can go check that out. But the revisions seem to be pretty minor from what I've seen between this version and the final version. What I'm most excited about really is just the fact that they sent us one so we can test this thing out. And we're certainly gonna have a lot of chance to put it to the test when we're up in Colorado running trails because the weight of this tire will be bouncing around all day long and we'll see just how strong it is and if it really does protect the tailgate the way I hope. But overall, I think it looks really stout. I'm pretty happy with the general design. So once we do have the final version in hand, I'm sure I'll be bringing you another video to show you how to install it and give you guys a little bit more detail into what makes that bracket special. But I figured I would tease it out here. So that's all I've got for you on this. All right, I think it's about time we wrap up this video, and I appreciate it if you guys stuck it out to the end. I know this was a long one, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And also, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought, and let me know what parts you want to see next on this build. I knocked out quite a bit of stuff that I personally like, but I want to hear what you guys are interested in. And I do have some more parts in back there that we will be throwing on in future videos. So stay tuned for that. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.